talk briefly about thyroid disease and try and keep it to about 5 minutes, and Dr. Fletcher the same in order to give Dr. Savitz more time. Ron, could you hit the next one?
Would you mind going back to the microphones?
If they work. Do they work?
Well, no, but everyone's recording from right there.
Oh, you're recording to the microphones whether they work or not.
Yes.
Okay, so I start over? No.
No, you're fine. Just
Go
start.
ahead if you want. Yeah.
That would be really boring. Okay. Thyroid disease report. So there's some things in the literature which are not conclusive regarding the effect of PFOA on thyroid hormones and on thyroid disease. But they tend to have different answers, and they're not clear with regard to whether PFOA causes changes in hormones or it increases the risk of disease. And so the science panel has been conducting some research on this point, which I'm going to describe briefly. Go ahead, Ron. The present study, as you can see, is a follow-up study of approximately 2,000 mid-Ohio Valley residents exposed to PFOA in the drinking water. This includes workers at DuPont and workers in the so-called community cohort that we created from the Brookmar C8 Health Project. All subjects were interviewed in 2009-2010 regarding their medical history and dates of diagnosis. This will be the database that we use for many probable link judgments because it has reports on disease across the board. Today I'm going to focus on thyroid disease. And it has dates of diagnosis. And that's key for us because we need to estimate what exposure was before the disease occurred. So when people report thyroid disease to us, they tell us when those thyroid disease were diagnosed. And then we have to think about what the PFOA level was before that diagnosis. So we had to estimate the past levels of C8 in the blood. And that's been a long project which is finished this year. And we think it gives us a pretty good idea on what people's blood levels were in the past. So thyroid disease is fairly common, and about 10% of the respondents reported thyroid disease in the past, and women, as expected, had about 5 times more thyroid disease than men. It's much more common among women. We obtained medical records for about 2/3 of these cases, and among them, about 90% were confirmed. We found a positive trend of increasing thyroid disease with increasing cumulative C8 blood levels, and I stress cumulative here. There's lots of ways to look at past exposure. We believe that one of the best ways is to look at the cumulative amount of it you've had in your body before the thyroid disease occurred, and that's the exposure that we used in this particular analysis. This trend of increased thyroid disease with increasing blood levels, cumulative blood levels, was significant statistically for women and nearly significant for men and women combined. And those in the highest exposed group, say in the exposure 20% to 100%, that's the top 4/5, had about 50% more disease than the lowest 20%. But there was no consistent increase within the upper 4/5 of the population. The excess risk we found was most consistent for hypothyroidism, a condition where thyroid hormone levels are too low. Most thyroid disease is divided between hypothyroidism, where the thyroid hormones are too low, and hyperthyroidism, where they're too high. So we were able to differentiate those two kinds of disease, and we will, most of the excess that we found was in the hypothyroidism for women. Hypothyroidism is much more common also than hyperthyroidism. Additional new data on thyroid hormones will be available from future science panel work. Dr. Fletcher will report on change in thyroid hormones in relation to change in PFOA in what I call the follow-back study, which he can describe because he's going to talk about lipids in that study. And that's all I have, and welcome questions at the end when everyone's done their presentation.